levels certainly take over the conversation when talking about any sort of titular Dungeons and Dragons. So I need to be really specific in regard to these fellows, which I'm using. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, first version. There's a lot of train wreck here. The first train wreck actually began at the origin in 1974's publication, and then there's kind of a secondary, more massive train wreck in this particular set of texts. And whatever anyone thinks about that, I really don't care. I want to talk about how I'm dealing with it for purposes of the very delimited play that we're doing, which was to start with effectively fourth level characters in terms of experience points. They happen to be multi-classed for second level. And also the fact that we're not playing, decades. We're not planning on playing for so many, epic adventures that one might anticipate immense levels. So therefore, my first concern is not, how about leveling up? When do we, and how can we, and how can we make sure that this or that? But rather, is play inside a level any fun? So that's the first priority. And then leveling, as I see it, becomes a feature, a subroutine, or something that can feed into that fun. And that's really all I care about. So, what are some of the musings as the rules, as the textual rules, as I'm using them? I mean, I'm using the ones that I'm not, the ones I'm not using are gone, and the ones that are present, I'm using as best as I may. And so, what do we see? The first consideration is that in this zone, from about 4,000 experience points on for the foreseeable future, it really is necessary to have magical items. Treasure won't do it, and killing monsters far less than treasure certainly won't do it. So therefore, unless magical items come into play and get rated as experience points, then the issue is completely moot, and we will stay playing inside this level, which for all I know, would be fine. But as I say, I'm sort of interested in having it be a feature. And then let's take into account that issue of magic items placement, because all of a sudden the the prior choice, which is either to be extremely situational, this item is here because of backstory, and whatever that backstory may be, however powerful that item may be, or how it relates to who the characters are, or what they're doing, or anything, is all a matter of intersecting content on everyone's part. So that would be one way of doing it, what you might think of as the most naturalistic way. We're dealing with this landscape, we're dealing with its backstory, we're dealing with these characters in it. Or the other way, at the most extreme, you can grade in between the two of these as much as you like, but at the other extreme, we basically say, well, there are the appendix tables, which basically throw magical items around willy-nilly according to dice rolls, and that's that. By the way, dice rolls are involved in that first version too, so don't mistake me for saying this is about using dice versus not using dice. I'm just talking about the philosophies behind their use. The one being the naturalistic, the other one being much more of the zoom our way through all these different, interesting encounters, and magical items are popping up all over the place in, who knows what ways. So, first of all, faced with that dichotomy, it seems like a lot to consider. Now I'm saying that if we take into account the outsize and, in fact, necessary presence of magical items for experience points to have anything to do with levels, then we have a kind of a new variable in the mix of, well, which ones, and um, how often, how many. And then with those in mind, and all of a sudden it becomes a pacing problem. Okay, the more, then the more experience points, and the more we see levels, and also the well, conversely, the less, obviously. And then in combination with that, the notion of, well, what does this do to play? We suddenly have um, the most important uh, destabilizer, if that's the right word, of the rather harsh mano a mano comparison of characters and foes. Remember, level per level, the foes kind of have the edge. They've got more harsh effects that hit saving throws or require saving throws, often with very dire effects for failure. And they typically have a better roll to hit, on even levels. So a few other things too. So magic items basically make an enormous difference. So you both have more leveling up and you have more survivability and all sorts of things. They really change play. Certainly above a quantum. If you're sticking with the odd one use potion and the odd scroll and the odd +1 here or there, then it's kind of a little wiggling on there, a bit of modification. But if we're starting to toss in, the horn of mighty blowing and all manner of other things and decks of many things and who knows what, even one really hefty sword with a mind, or any number of other things, not to mention the ones that actually level you up. You actually get not only experience points for the thing, but you also benefit in terms of a variety of your own abilities. So all of those things really alter play. So content, well, this is now a little bit of a matter of choice and a little bit of confusing choice because, okay, am I putting these things in so that we can get a steady stream of experience points that are notably progressive toward a level, which suddenly becomes integrated now with this notion of naturalism. So now I have to sort of backtrack and say, well, if I want this item, then how does it get in there? And it is arbitrary that I've chosen it because for one to be, benefiting from this, it has to be appropriate for one's class and any number of other things sometimes. So a certain contrivance appears. And I've sort of solved it at least once when I looked around and said, goodness, we have these, beginning effectively fourth level characters, and they don't even have any magic items. I gave all the clerics +1 daggers. They happen to be fighter clerics, and so they can use daggers, and so their holy symbol is this dagger. That's for the cleric assassin. For the good clerics, it's an ordinary holy symbol. It's not a weapon. But you see my point. I'm kind of uh, providing them with things that are very setting oriented, very identity oriented. And that's why the owned magic items that have come into play were very much given to the characters by non player characters. Here, have this. And I kind of made myself feel better by having them be provisional. That if the characters leveled up in the use of that item, then, uh, or rather, if they use the item in terms of the in fiction mission, that's what I meant, then when the experience points would count, they would get the item. The idea is, complete this mission and you can keep it, and then we will rate it in terms of experience points. And I was totally arbitrary by picking things that were 1,000 points per character. I even tweaked one, the Arrow of Slaying, which is 250 points, by effectively giving it 4 charges, or if you will, 4 arrows. Sort of bobbled that a little bit, but the idea is a 4 use 250 point item, so I'm going to make it 1,000 points. As written, it's 1 point, 1 use, you see. Anyway, you can see I'm really, I wiggle a rule to, and I have these NPCs give them these things, and then I sort of salve my conscience by saying that you can keep it if you finish the mission. And I'm not sure if I can keep this kind of logic up. I have noted that in a foe or two, potentially, I have in fact, hooray, rolled some magic stuff. on the table in the monster manual, and then moving to the appropriate table in the DM guide. And what I came up with is super freaking cool. And so that's great, but that's, that's once. That's once so far. And is it going to be a combination of when those things crop up, which I'm sort of enjoying what comes up out of the table, and then these other very, very, very diegetic, very personal, very who knows what it is. For example, the plant that the dryad gave to Hazel. I mean, am I going to turn that into a magic item? I mean, you want to talk about, messing with the situation from a purposeful point of view, which I'd prefer not to do. So magic items really bring all of these issues into play, and they bring this into play because of their outsized contribution to leveling up. And perhaps that's due to an outsized attention to leveling up, which, if we're only talking about having a good time playing as such, we shouldn't have to do, or shouldn't need to do, I should say. I'm also taking the titles of the levels pretty seriously as far as the clerics are concerned, particularly. One of the clerics has made the rank of priest, becoming a third level cleric, and I've taken that very seriously in game. Whether I do the same, I haven't really done the same for thief. Um, I'm not sure that the titles, for the thieves are really all that important. At least they don't feel important to me. And that the sense of Hazel as a third level thief now is more of just a regard that others may have. So I have some fictional identity for them at work. So I just see that as part of the making them a fun feature and drawing upon the terminology in the text. But that's as far as I'm getting with it for purposes of this game, and really doing sort of a self check on what I'm doing with magic items and arriving at some sort of logic for it that I can live with. All of these things are things that if you use these texts, whoever you are out there, you're going to have to make your own decisions because, as I say, the train wreck is not going to leave you with an understanding or a vision of what to do. That's going to have to be yours.